Spectre has been out for a few weeks now, and since I saw it on the 26th of October, which was the first night, it's been a few weeks since I've seen it, and I've not been able to stop thinking about it, and not in a good way. I left the cinema feeling disappointed. I mean, I enjoyed it, I just left feeling like I needed more. On the surface, at least, it's beautiful. The cinematography is outstanding, and I don't really want to say its beauty is only skin deep, but at best it's only subcutaneous tissue deep. That wasn't even funny. Great job, Sam. You know what really gets them hooked? Science jokes. I can't believe I looked that up on Wikipedia. You know what? If I could explain it succinctly, I wouldn't need to make this video, so let's stop wasting time and jump right in. To me, Skyfall was a film that was full of interesting themes. I mean, on one hand, we have Bond's anger and his resentment and his exasperation with MI6, which is what makes him disappear after being shot in the first place. And that's what Silver preys upon in order to get at M. But we also have this twisted patriotism and the fact that this brutal life is all he's ever known. And he depends on it, in the same way that he depends on alcohol. As an interesting aside, somebody analysed the Bond franchise and concluded that Daniel Craig's Bond drunk the most on screen and got the least girls, and I'll put the link to that on the screen and down in the description. Along with that, we have him being reminded that his body is aging and maybe, just maybe, is losing his touch. And that goes up against his pig-headedness and reluctance to face the mental and physical issues. These conflicts are simple, but they turn the action-driven plots, which capitalise on blam blams and kapows, into drama-driven plots. Bond becomes a conflicted, damaged character, as opposed to him being a two-dimensional male power fantasy who cracks wise and gets the girl. We have a small glimpse into his beginnings and explore the roots of all this damage at his childhood home, which gets symbolically destroyed by Silver, who then destroys him present in the form of M. Whereas in Spectre, we have something about Blofeld being his brother. I mean, can anyone explain that to me? Can anyone explain the fucking point of that? I mean, what the fuck is going on there? Come on! Skyfall also asked the interesting and necessary question. In the wake of the NSA whistleblowing and the revelation that every first world nation is spying on its own and other nations' data with ease, are spies, and by association Bond, even relevant anymore? This question is what a lot of the film hinges around, and we get a great insight into it through the courtroom scenes, the interaction between Judi Dench's M and Ralph Fiennes' M, and Bond himself. Spectre decides that it can also wear big boy pants and attempts to ask a big question as well. Little do they know that it's actually the same question wearing a different tie. They did a shit job. Made all the more shit by the fact that we already did this in the last film. Seriously, this is the worst part about this film, and I believe it can be removed with no consequence to the overall plot. Well, very little consequence to the overall plot. And this is not an isolated incident either. There are vast swathes of this film in which fuck all happens. That was excessively vitriolic, wasn't it? This is all getting a bit negative. Tell you what, let's just take a break from that for a minute and talk about something that Spectre did well. As I mentioned earlier, the cinematography in this film is amazing, and the scene which epitomises this is the Blofeld reveal. It is a masterclass in telling a story through camera, action and reaction. Christoph Waltz is fantastic as Blofeld. Well, Christoph Waltz is fantastic in everything, so... But anyway, the rest of the casting is fantastic as well. Ralph Fiennes is great, Naomi Harris is great, Andrew Scott is great, Monica Bellucci's character was pointless, so let's not worry about her. Ben Whishaw is great, Léa Seydoux made me feel feelings that I wasn't prepared for, and now I'm scared that I've formed an emotional connection with someone that I'm unlikely to meet, let alone have a chance to be with. Dave Bautista is great, everyone is great. Which brings up an excellent point, actually. What is the point of Monica Bellucci's character? I mean, Bond just creepily gawps at her at her husband's funeral. I can't believe I even have to mention that that's a social faux pas. And if you're considering that as a possible pickup method, I'd probably just stay out of the dating game, to be honest. Let's just not be doing it. If that's something you're considering, maybe it's gone too far. Maybe you don't deserve love. So he breaks into her house to taste her underwear, steal her cutlery and her hair bubbles, I don't know, save her life or whatever. And she actually decides to have sex with this dude. And then weirdly cut to post-sex and her wearing a corset, which he wasn't wearing before from what I can tell. And I just imagine him being like, whoa, can you maybe have something that can straighten that shit out? Glad we didn't choose you as the main Bond girl. And then she gives him some information about the plot or whatever. I mean, what was the point in that? That was just make James Bond have sex with Monica Bellucci time. Pointless. Totally pointless. Right, I feel the need to regain control here. Let's do some analysis of equivalent scenes in the film. We'll begin at the beginning. I mean, I'm not Kubrick. Skyfall opens with an excellent shot of Bond in shadow, then emerging into light as well as focus, then raising his weapon into the foreground. Instantly we get a feel for his character, unclear at first, but over time emerging into clarity. He's sharp dressing, cautious and quick to draw. And with his weapon in the foreground, there's also the suggestion that his weapon is the most important part about him, and that he is only his gun, which is touched upon again throughout the film. His character develops further as he enters the next room and finds a fellow agent dying and moves to help him, with them telling him to just leave him to die. Just a few moments into the film, and Bond is already being fleshed out, and the theme of his conflicts with M is established. Whereas Skyfall opened with a buttload of character building right out the gate, Spectre opens with an unbroken shot of some sort of carnival. It really stood out to me, and I thought it was cool, and I pointed out the fact there'd been no obvious cuts yet to the person I went with. Interestingly, in a subversion of gender roles, Bond uses his sexual attractiveness as a means to an end to gain a clean shot at this mysterious target. This is ordinarily reserved for some sort of femme fatale character, such as that one out of GoldenEye whose name I may have forgotten. Now, I don't know how long that section was because I don't have a DVD in front of me, but I get the feeling that it was as long or longer than the part I chose to analyse in Skyfall, and we didn't really learn anything from Spectre. All we learned was that he's a smooth guy, and we sort of already knew that. All we saw was things in a place. It was purely style. There was no substance. The action scenes which follow are worlds apart in my eyes. The dialogue in the earpieces really compounds the themes really well, and the action is outrageous, but it toes the line really well. One of the moments which brings it back to reality is when Bond gets shot the first time. It really books the idea that some people may have had, that he was a superhero who wears invincible plot armour. But along with his second shooting, where he falls off the bridge, we learn that he is eminently mortal. In Spectre, Bond chases a man into a helicopter, which then starts doing loop-the-loops over a carnival. Nothing of consequence happens. That aside, it strikes me as a homage to classic Bond, with the battle sequences and set pieces. And that's not inherently a bad thing, but to me it seems like it's undoing the hard work in self-awareness that Casino Royale set forth and Skyfall continued. Let's talk about the Q scenes. Skyfall's Q scene is less than 3 minutes long and is full to the brim with important details. The shot opens with a shot of a painting, an archaic form of art of an archaic scene, an old battleship being towed off for scrap. As everyone has already worked out, Bond is the old battleship in this metaphor. This idea that Bond is past it is redoubled when Q shows up. Bond clearly finds his youth ridiculous and doesn't take Q seriously at all. Once again, we return to the theme that Bond is only his weapon when he questions why he is needed. And Q replies, "Occasionally we need someone to pull the trigger." Then, when handed his new pistol, Q says it's more of a personal statement. This Q scene is also modest. The scene starts in silence, they talk in whispers, the music enters only after they've accepted each other, and despite its brevity, there's a lot of room to breathe. His equipment he receives is a plane ticket and an unassuming metal case with but a radio transmitter and the aforementioned pistol. Q then mentions how ridiculous exploding pens are, a self-aware jab at the pantomime of previous Bond films. Bond films are, after all, a genre in their own right, and the scene closes with a genre signifier, Q imploring Bond to bring it all back in one piece. In Spectre, we have smart blood. No, I didn't misspeak. I think they missed the point there. I think they missed the point of that whole scene. I mean, it was only 3 minutes, maybe they fell asleep. I mean, it got to have been written by somebody from the 18th century who got pulled through a time portal into present day and given a 15-minute crash course on things kids like. Then immediately, Bond asks Q to disregard it. He asks him not to track him using it and not report to M. I mean, maybe it's there so that it can display Bond's disregard, is the fact he's going AWOL maybe, and maybe it's there so that Q can find him a bit later on, but there are better ways to do that, which don't involve fucking smart blood. The final thing I'd like to compare is the villains. I've already mentioned how much I like Waltz's Blofeld, but Javier Bardem's Silva, I have to admit, does not capture me nearly as much. I wanted more from his character, and with Bardem being such an amazing actor, it shouldn't have been a problem. Two of the main criticisms of Skyfall were the cyber-terrorist cliché, which came across a bit like the writers didn't really understand it, and the Joker cliché, where every villain gets caught, only for it to turn out that it was all part of the plan. I can forgive the second part, purely for the fact that it's such an exciting and fun bit of cinema. The level of power that Silva seems to have is genuinely intimidating, and makes the seemingly omnipotent MI6 seem like amateurs, whether it be blowing up M's office or breaking out of that cell. There's no moment in Spectre where I felt like Blofeld carries the same amount of actual power. Bond is always escaping, Bond is always foiling his plan. Blofeld looks incompetent in comparison. I guess the point that I'm trying to make is that Spectre seemed to me like it was all style and very little substance in the shadow of its just as attractive but more accomplished older brother. Don't get me wrong, it's no Quantum of Solace, but it was not the film that I wanted after enjoying Skyfall so much. It seemed like a return to the classic Bond movies, where the story was driven mainly by the plot as opposed to Casino Royale and Skyfall, where character is more important, even if the plot still drives the story. But worse than that, many of the parts felt ham-fisted and ridiculous, like when they're heading off for the final conflict, Lea Seydoux' character decides for no reason whatsoever not to come. It stood out to me as a really poor bit of writing which seemed rushed in there at the last moment, and doesn't seem like something a character would even do. Not to mention Andrew Scott's death scene. Jesus Christ, not only was it unnecessary, it was like something out of the fucking Chuckle Brothers, who incidentally I met quite recently. All that being said, it is still very much worth seeing, even if it is just for the fight scene on the train or Waltz's performance. It edges into the absurd on many occasions, but as I said at the beginning, I couldn't help but enjoy it. But at the end of the day, in 5 years' time, when it's raining and you and your mates are wondering what film to watch, Casino Royale and Skyfall would still win out every time. So, despite the fact that I have much more to say about both Spectre and Skyfall, I am going to call it here. Hey, you made it through the video though. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like, and if you have any thoughts or comments about it, please leave them in the comment section below. I'd love to hear from you. Thanks again for listening, and subscribe for more things Sammy likes.